is it about March? Honestly, why is March the month that seems to have the most wonderful, attractive, appealing readathons in it, all at the same time in a completely impossible fashion? I'm not the only person to be thinking this right now, I bet. Lots of you out there are. And one person I know is Kelly of Books I'm Not Reading, because she was saying the same thing. And her theory about why March has this March Readathon Madness about it is the word March just sort of lends itself, doesn't it, to readathons, something about it. Anyway, I'm aware of 4 brilliant readathons in March that I want to take part in. And can I do it? I don't know. I'm going to give it a try. Because I have to admit, I love a readathon. Why do I love a readathon? I like the fact that they concentrate my mind on particular books and particular themes or sort of countries, traditions of literature. I have, you know this, I think, I have in my head and on paper and in Goodreads this enormous long list of books I want to get to read that I'm constantly adding to, that's impossible to ever get through it all. And so, how do I choose? And one way to choose is because a readathon pops up, and what I do is I think, what's in my long list that will fit this readathon? What will fit with the prompts, or fit with, where it comes from the country in question, or comes, whatever it is. So that's one reason why I really love them. And what's the first one that I'm doing in March? Well, the first is more of a fairly non-specific but inspirational idea, and that's March of the Mammoths. And March of the Mammoths, which is hosted by Jason of All Blues, Chapter and Verse, and a number of others, and I'll put a link below so that you can find all the others. But it's about encouraging us to have a go at picking up and reading a really long book, long enough that we'd be put off perhaps from giving it a go, even though it's something that we want to read. Well, brilliant idea. And you'll already know probably that what I'm doing for March of the Mammoths this year is reading Don Quixote, which I've meant to read for years, which was one of my Mooks and Gripes bucket list of 10 things I most want to, get around to reading and haven't. And I'm doing it as a group read. We've got a brilliant group on Voxer of people that are all going to join in. It's not too late to join us for March. If you fancy giving it a go, we're not going to finish the book in March. We're going to give ourselves more time. If you're at all interested, then I will put my Voxer link in the description, and message me, and you can join the Voxer group and join the fun. So if reading Cervantes is something you've always meant to do, there you go. Alongside that, and this is not a mammoth, but to keep the sort of to sort of enrich my reading of Cervantes, I guess I'm going to read one of his contemporaries with Tilly of Tilly's Shelf for our discussing drama this month, and we're going to read a play called Fuenteovejuna by Lope de Vega, who was a Spanish dramatist of the same sort of Spanish Golden Age. So there we go. That's one of my March things. What's number 2? Number 2 is it's March Mystery Madness. You all know it's March Mystery Madness. That's probably the biggest Marchy readathon that there is, and it's been going the longest. Again, a number of hosts, but the one who kind of reminds me of it each year is Janet Remembered Reads, and I'll link to her video below, and then you'll get all the other hosts as well. And the prompt this year is just such a smart prompt. The prompt is 2 by 2, so it's a really open prompt for you to choose some kind of mystery book that fits that or more. And I've got just the one for me. I'm so happy because my 2 by 2 is book 2 in a series, the Peter posthumous series, and this series by Britta Bolt is actually, Britta Bolt is 2 authors, so it's book 2 in a series by 2 authors. Britta Boller, the one of our booktube queens, is one of the authors, and the other is Rodney Bolt, but they write together this series under the pseudonym Britta Bolt. So perfect. And I read book 1 of the series last month and really enjoyed it, so raring to go with that one. Now then, what's the third? Goodness, did I say there was 4? There's actually 5. There's 5. What's the third? What's the third readathon that I'm taking part in? Well, the third is my least favourite, but it's the one with all the M's again, and that's Middle Grade March. Now, I'm not a great reader of middle grade fiction. I mean, I enjoy it if I'm reading it to a child of the appropriate age, but mostly wouldn't read it for myself. But I'm taking part in a book challenge this year where one of the prompts for the book challenge is to read a book you loved as a child. So that's the perfect excuse to read a book that you could describe as middle grade in March to fit with the readathon. Why not? So I'm going to read The Treasure Seekers by E. Nesbit, which is she was a late Victorian, early Edwardian, well, I was going to say children's writer. She was also very political person, very interesting woman, but wonderful books for children, and that's my middle grade March readathon choice. Then there's 2 more, but 4 and 5 are like the it's like the battle of the Celtic dragons, because one is the Irish readathon and the other is the Welsh readathon, or Dewithon as it is known, and I'm going to throw caution to the wind and try and take part in both, because the kind of that western fringe of the British archipelago, you know, Wales and Ireland, have some of the most exciting literature. And of the 2, I have to say, I probably read more Irish than Welsh, so it'd be good to be sort of pushed to do a little bit of Welsh reading too. But I'm going to start with the Irish readathon and say, now the host for this one that I'm most familiar with is Aoife of Words of Clover, and so I will link to her below. And there's a bunch of prompts. One of the prompts is to read something that's been recommended by one of the hosts, and so I'm kind of going with that one. Okay, but in the spirit of my looking at my long list and thinking, what can I use this readathon to kind of get me to read now rather than have it languish there for another however long, is I'm going to read Leonard and Hungry Paul by Ronan Hession, Irish writer, current Irish writer. I know that I've seen Aoife recommend a book by Ronan Hession. It may actually have been his next book, Panenka, but I'm going to put that out of my head because I really want to read Leonard and Hungry Paul first, because I've been meaning to read it since Brian Bookish enthused about it, like almost like at the beginning of COVID-19, as a sort of, his description of it was a book that was kind of warm and uplifting without being in any way sugary or sentimental, and sounded like, and yeah, he loved it, and so I really want to read that, particularly after seeing Ronan Hession a couple of times talking about books on Sean the Bookmaniac's channel. He just seems such a nice bloke. And the other book that I'm going to read for the Irish Readathon is one that was I heard about first because it was recommended by Ronan Hession on Sean the Bookmaniac's channel, and that is What Willow Says by Lynn Buckle. But I have an extra spur to read that now because it's just won the Barbillion Prize. And the Barbillion Prize is a prize for books by disabled writers, or where sort of the themes around disability are really prominent in the book, but not in the sort of really irritating, my most hated literary trope way of where, you know, the disabled character has to be either either the devil or the angel in the plot. So books that don't do that. And I've got 3 out of the 4 Barbillion shortlist, and this one was the one that won. And so I'm going to read what Willow says. It's a book about being deaf. Yeah, a novel, short novel. So that's the Irish readathon. But as I say, I thought, oh, there's 4 readathons I'm taking part in. That's fine. I'll fit that in. And then I heard on Heather's channel. Heather is the soggy expat book nerd, and she's an American woman living in Welsh. If you don't follow her, she's brilliant. She now speaks in this kind of wonderful Welsh come American accent. It's like, and she's really funny. And she often records whilst eating or drinking, which has a certain charm. Anyway, she reminded me that it's Dewithon, and also in March. So I'm going to rise to the challenge, and I'm going to read a book that, again, I've meant to read. It very much one that's been sitting on that long list of mine for a while, and that is One Moonlit Night by Caradoc Pritchard. And that was a book, he wrote it in 1961 in Welsh. It's often talked about as the finest Welsh language novel, I think, or Wales's greatest novel. And I'm someone that likes to read books in translation. So the idea that I've never read a book in translation from a principality that is part of the actual, country that I live in is just, it's positively embarrassing, isn't it? It was translated by Philip Mitchell in 1997, and he translated because he read it at school or college in Welsh, and was just shocked to discover that it had never been translated into English to be accessible to those of us that don't speak Welsh. So that's my 5 readathons that I'm taking part in, and the things that I'm going to read for them. Also in March, what else will be on my March TBR? Well, that's enough. But actually, I'll have 3 books to read for the BookTube Prize. Also translated fiction, because that's the group that I'm reading for. I'm really looking forward to those. I've got a couple of graphic novels in mind as part of my ongoing, get into graphic project, which is going really well, and I will update you about those soon. And I'll also need to fit in some poetry. If possible, I'll pick something Welsh to fit with the Dewithon theme. Yeah. But before I go, I want to talk about something that's happening in April, okay? Because obviously we need a bit of warning, ideally, for readathons and read-alongs and events, don't we? And so I've just happily realised about something I need to plan to fit into April, and that is that in April, Sagalong is back. Sagalong, I love. It's one of my absolute favourite read-alongs of the bookish year. Why? Because it's got me into reading Icelandic and Norse sagas, something that a literary form that I was aware of and sort of knew about in principle and read little excerpts from, but I'd never read a whole one. Yeah, it's like I like children, but I wouldn't eat a whole one. No, I thought I liked sagas, but I hadn't read a whole one. And with sagas, Tilly of Tilly Shelfer is one of the hosts, explains this really well in her little intro video. But that with sagas, the more of them you read, the more you enjoy them. The first one you read, you think, oh, this is a bit weird. And by the time you're on to your 3rd, say, you're just lapping it up. And that's true. And this year they're reading Egil's Saga, which is one that is one of the more accessible sagas, I think. And I'm really looking forward to it. I haven't read it. It's going to be read in 4 chunks across the 4 weeks which will make it quite digestible. So if you know Sagalong, you'll be keen to take part, and if you never have, this could be a good one to kind of get in on this year. Again, there's loads of hosts. Tilly's one, but the sort of, I think the mover and shaker that makes sure it happens each year is Elena Macreda, so I'll link to her launch video too. And one other thing that I will briefly mention is that April is when I am starting to read Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain, and Greg and I are, Greg of Another Bibliophile Reads, are sort of hosting a group read for that in the same way that kind of hosting one with a couple of other people for Don Quixote. So if you fancy that one, and I think we may try and like fit it into, well, we haven't exactly agreed how many weeks we're going to take to read it, but we there's a bit of a plan. Greg's got a bit of a plan, and I'm along there to support him. So again, if you're interested in that, send me a Voxer message and we can add you to what's already a nicely forming Voxer group. Okay, tell me what your March and April reading plans are. Are you doing, how many readathons are you taking on in March? Are you doing all 5 that I've come up with? Is there a 6th or a 7th one that I've missed? Let me know. But I say that with trepidation, because will I feel like I ought to have a go at those as well? Thanks, everyone, and happy reading.